Okay, we're holding over here in PARSHAS VAYEISHEV, and we have one of the very obscure PARSHAS in the Torah that requires a little bit of study, but I don't want to get trapped into the storyline itself. I want to hopefully get to what the message is afterwards. We have the famous union of Yehuda and Tamar in this week's Parsha. Yehuda is the father-in-law of Tamar. His son passes away. She's a widow. And he's not supposed to, a father-in-law is not supposed to marry or to be with, to have relations with his daughter-in-law. And yet we find that he does. And from that union, there are twins. And from those twins will come great malachim, great kings. Amongst them, Dovid HaMelech, his dynasty. And that dynasty leads, as we know, of course, to Mashiach Tzidkenu. So the question which is always bothersome, we find the same thing by Lot and his daughters. They're not supposed to be together. They are together. From them will come Moab. From Moab will end up coming Rus. From Rus will end up coming Dovid. From Dovid will come Mashiach. So the roots of Mashiach are something that are obscure, to say the least, and difficult to understand. But we find throughout history, the Ramchal points this out in his Sefer Das Tevunos, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something to happen, as obscure and as puzzling as it is, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu will manipulate people's lives and manipulate the nature, manipulate people's minds and their hearts and their emotions in order to bring about into this world what it is that he needs to happen for things to continue on, where the ultimate goal, of course, is that Mashiach should come. And the Midrash says in this week's parsha the following. Again, Vayireha Yehuda. Yehuda is going down the street, and he sees a woman on the crossroads, and her face is covered with a veil, and he believes that she is a prostitute. Now you're Yehuda, you're one of the children of Yaakov Avinu. You are the one that is chosen. Malachim, kings are going to come from you, Yehuda. That means that you are a strong man, you are a tzaddik, you are a righteous person. So you're not going to be bothered by prostitution. This is not Los Angeles, California, 2023. This is Yehuda, the Melech, the king, who's going to be a king of Klal Yisrael. Vayiraecha Yehuda. Yehuda sees her, or she appears to Yehuda. And the pasuk says like this: Lo yishkiach. He wasn't really paying attention. He's walking down the street. He's minding his own business. Kevan shekisasa paneya Omar. I'm sorry. Next one. Omar of Yochanan bikesh la'avor v'zimen la'akadosh baruch hu. So Yehuda is walking down. He sees over here, her face is covered. He thinks that she is a zayna, she is a prostitute, and he's moving on. However, bikesh la'avor, he wanted to just pass right by her. He doesn't get mixed up in these kind of things over here. V'zimen la'akadosh baruch hu malach. Hashem brought an angel, Shumamuna ala taiva, the angel that is commanded on taiva, on lust and desire. Amaloi, and the angel of taiva, of lust and desire, says to Yehuda, Yehuda, heichanata hailech, where are you going right now? Miheichan malachim oimdin umeheichan gedolim oimdim. If you don't get together with Tamar right now, where are the kings of the world going to come from? Where are the Gedolim, where are the great leaders of Klal Yisrael going to come from? Stay right where you are. Vayet alei al haderech, and he veered off the path, Yehuda, and he went to Tamar. Bal korchai shaloi b'tovasai. It was against his will that he ended up having relations together with Tamar, and from there comes two children, and from those two children comes Dovid HaMelech, and eventually from Dovid will end up coming Mashiach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something to take place in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does what he needs to do to manipulate things in such a way that it's going to happen. But suffice to say, it did happen. And Yehuda now is the subject of a very sordid affair. And Tamar is the protagonist, so to speak, of a very sordid affair. And she made a deal with him. I'll lie with you if you give me some things that will be like my collateral, that I can know that you are the one that is going to be the father of the children that will come. And now they send word to Yehuda. Yehuda, you know what happened to your daughter-in-law? She was sitting Shiva. Her husband died. And now it's 3 months later and she's pregnant. And she's not married. So how does this woman become married? How did she end up getting pregnant? So the Pesukim go on and they tell us, as I'm sure that we're very well aware of, that Hu mutzeis v'hi shalchel chamia, he brings her out and he says, Tisaref, you're going to be burned. You're a married woman, he imposed the death penalty on her, she's going to burn by the fires. V'hi shalchel chamia leimor leisha she'ela lo yanoichi hara. She sends him his 3 things, his signet ring, his staff, and the cloak. And she says, whoever these 3 things belong to, he is the one that is the father of my children. And she says, recognize very well, Yehuda, who these 3 things belong to. Now Rashi says over here, and the Sforno really, sometimes you read the Sforno and you are wondering, what did he add to Rashi? He seems to be saying almost the same exact thing. He adds basically one word on the Rashi over here. And that word is that Tamar is in a shas sakana. She's in a moment of danger. She's about to be burnt at the stake and to be killed. And she has every right in the world to say, hey, Yehuda's the one who did this to me. It wasn't my fault. This guy came along, he found me on the derech, he ended up violating me and he made me pregnant. It's not my fault, it's his fault. But we know the famous words of Chazal. And she said, Im yoyde ma'atzma yoyde. I'll send him these 3 things. If Yehud admits on his own, let him admit. V'im lav, and if he doesn't admit, yisarfuni, I'll burn up to ashes. V'al al bin panav, I refuse to embarrass and shame Yehuda in front of everyone that is here. Mikan amru, from here Chazal teach us, Noyach loy la'adam sheyapil atzmai l'chiv shana eish. It is better for a person to throw themselves into the fiery furnace. V'al yalbin p'nei chaver b'rabim, and do not, God forbid, do not embarrass a person and do not shame them and do not make them embarrassed in front of everyone else. B'rabim, in public. She's a woman who has every right in the world right now to save her life and not to get burned. And she is entitled. She didn't do anything really. Ultimately, as you see from the Midrash, Yehuda is the one who went off the derech. Yehuda is the one who went to her. Yehuda is the one that had relations with her. But she said, Chalila v'chas, God forbid, I am not going to embarrass the face of Yehuda in front of the rabbim, the masses that are here. I will keep it all to myself. If it means I will die, so be it. If you want to be someone that malachim, that angels, that kings are going to come from, if you want to be someone that Mashiach Tzidkenu eventually is going to come from, if you want to be someone that there will be leaders that will stem from you, and they will guide Klal Yisrael for generations and generations, then you yourself must be a melech, you must be a king over yourself. You must be someone that is in control of your emotions, someone that is in control of your midos, someone that is in control of your actions. When you bring a woman like a Tamar into the world, and by the way, she was completely l'shem shemayim when she had these relations. She wanted to bring the seed of Mashiach into this world. She knew that Yehuda was the king that's going to have the offspring that will end up eventually bringing Mashiach, that will save us from all the mess that we are in. That's all that she wanted. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't adultery. This wasn't some wild fantasy that some young girl had when she went to some concert and she's oohing and awing at the person singing on stage. It wasn't Chalila. It was l'shem shemayim, was for the sake of heaven. And her sake of heaven brought her to a moment where she's about to get killed. And she said, better that I should get killed than to embarrass the face of Yehuda in front of the rabbim, in front of everyone that is here. That's malchus. That's kingdom. That's sovereignty. That's someone that is able to rule over themselves and their midos and their desires and their even will to live. Because if my will to live is going to embarrass another person, Chalila v'chas, I would not do such a thing. One of the great Rosh Yeshivas of, maybe he passed away, I'm not sure exactly, maybe 15, 20 years ago, Rabbi Avram Ganachovsky from Bnei Brak. So he was known to be a tzaddik in many, many areas of his life. One of the things, his brachas, his blessings, his davening was something that was l'maylim and ateva, above the laws of nature. When he would say Asher Yatzar, just the bracha when you walk out of the restroom, he wasn't like us that were like that, running around as we're saying the blessing. He was a person that he would stop and he would stand and he would say the bracha, probably what he would do in an Asher Yatzar, we don't even do in a Shmoneh Esrei. That's how his Asher Yatzar used to look. So one day in the yeshiva building, the pipes in the building broke. They were stalled up, they weren't working, and the water wasn't running. And he had to go to the restroom. Well, when you leave the bathroom, everybody knows you have to wash your hands. Before you say a bracha, you have to wash your hands. So one of his students watched as the Rosh Yeshiva went into the restroom, and he said, you know what, I'm going to help the Rosh Yeshiva. He's going to walk out of the bathroom. There's no running water. He won't be able to wash his hands. How's he going to make a bracha? So this boy runs across the street with a negovasa, with the washing cup in his hand. He goes into the next building across the street. He turns on the faucet. Of course, I'm sure that he asked permission to take the water. He said, I need one bottle of water over here, one negovasa of water to be able to take back to Yeshiva. They told him no problem. And he takes it back and he's holding it like he's holding the crown jewels. He is so excited to be able to do this mitzvah for the Rosh Yeshiva. As he walks into the building, he sees the Rosh Yeshiva walking away from the sink area. And he says, Rosh Yeshiva, I brought you water. Ooh, he says, thank you so much. He goes over, he puts it into the sink, he washes his hands, and he quickly says, and he says the bracha Asher Yatzar. So this boy doesn't understand. The Rosh Yeshiva, when he says Asher Yatzar, he's always with such kavana, such intent, such concentration, such devekis, devotion to Hashem. Why did he say such a bizarre Asher Yatzar? He looked like he came from America. What's going on over there? So the boy was very bothered. He'd gone out of his way to get the water. He wanted the Rosh Yeshiva to say such a beautiful bracha, and that's the bracha that he says. So the Shiva walked on. He said, thank you very much for the water. He walked on. So the boy turned to the other bacher that was in. He says, is the Rosh feeling okay? And the boy said, yeah, he's fine. He said, that's not the bracha that he makes. Is everything okay? He says, oh, you don't know what happened, do you? He said, the Rosh went to the restroom. He says, you ran across the street to get water. While you were across the street, you should know that the water turned back on and the pipes were working. When the Rosh walked out of the bathroom, he went to the sink, he turned on the water, he washed his hands. And he said an Asher Yatzar with all the kavanah, all the intention that he usually does. It was beautiful. You came running in and you said, I have water, I have water, I have water. He didn't want to hurt your feelings and tell you that he already washed his hands and he already said the bracha. So he said, fine, of course, thank you so much. He washed his hands again with your water, but he didn't have to say a bracha. So he made it look like he said a bracha, that something was wrong with him and it should be something wrong with you. A melech, a king, is someone that is in total control of themselves. In every situation, their mind is always working. What can I do to make sure that I don't hurt this person, I don't hurt that person, I don't offend that person? He's seeing already, he looks like he's like on a football field over there. He's seeing the whole field in front of him. He's thinking about every single person like a chessboard. You're always thinking to yourself, a few steps ahead, what could I do for this person and for that person to make sure that everything is according to the way the Torah would want a person to act? Says the Torah, you want kings to come from you. You want Mashiach Zikenu to come from you. So that's only going to be if you're a melech, if you're a king yourself. And therefore she says, better that I should send myself into the fires and burn myself up to smithereens, than to embarrass this one man, Yehuda, over here, who's a melech, a tzaddik, a righteous man on his own, the son of Yaakov Avinu, who eventually all the kings of the world will come from him. I can't embarrass him. And Yehuda, the melech himself, V'yakir Yehuda, Yehuda recognized these three things that she showed him. V'yoymer, and he said, Tzadka mimeni. Tzadka mimeni, she is correct, or she is more righteous than me. Yehuda did not have to say a word. Yehuda could have remained, he's a king. He's got special protection as the king. Could have just let things go the way that they are. In order for Yehuda to admit right now in front of the Rabbi, in front of everyone, he has to embarrass himself. But Yehuda said, Tzadka mimeni. She's a more righteous person than I am. She is correct and I am wrong. That's why his name is Yehuda. Yehuda means I'm willing to admit the mistakes that I have made. I'm not too embarrassed. I'm not too proud. I don't have too much gaiva, too much haughtiness, too much arrogance. I'm willing to admit the mistakes that I have made, and therefore, tzadka mimeni, says Rashi on these words, Baskol darshu shiyatza baskol v'amra. There was a baskol, a heavenly voice that came out from the heavens, and it said, Mimeni, HaKadosh Baruch Hu now comes to Yehuda's defense, and he says, Mimeni, this whole scenario, Yehuda would end up being together with Tamar. It's Mimeni, it's from me. Umeiti yotzo devarim, from me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything came from me. I masterminded the entire ordeal, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the baskol that everybody heard. Yehuda takes claim for what he did wrong. Yehuda apologizes to Tamar, you're right and I am wrong. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Al tidag, don't worry. I'll let everybody know what's going on over here right now, Yehuda. When you were coerced into being with her, that was the Malach HaTaiva, that was the angel of Taiva, of desire. You were on your way, you were going to walk away, but I have grander plans, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the plans are kings. Dovid HaMelech, his dynasty, Mashiach, has to come from you. Says the Torah, Yehuda, you want to be a melech, you want to be a king, you want to have the rights and the privilege of bringing in a Dovid HaMelech and Mashiach into this world, you've got to be a melech, you have to be a king over yourself. As we learn from the famous words in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah tells us, Ezeu Gibor, who is a strong person, HaKoivish es Yitzro, the one that subdues his Yetzirah. And the Mishnah brings a pasuk over there, that it is better to be someone that is going to be subduing their Yetzirah, subduing their taivas and their bad midas, than a loichet ir, than someone that will conquer an entire city. That means the real strength of a person is not the might. The real strength of the person is not their ingenious battle plans. The real strength of a person is how much can you rule over yourself. How much can you be in control of your midas, of your character? How much can you be in control of your taivas, of your desires? How much can you admit in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you do something wrong and move forward in life and not to get caught up in the disgrace that you have? I mean, can you just imagine the disgrace that's going on over here? You have Yehuda, the son of Yaakov Avinu, just admits openly that he had relations with a woman out of wedlock that he's not supposed to be with, and she's pregnant with his children, and the whole world knows about it, and now everybody's watching. Can you imagine the disgrace? Most people would crawl into their bed, lock the door behind them, and they would put on the face of retribution, and they would never come out of the rooms again. The despair would be tremendous. That's what happens when people do sin. When people sin, they despair, they get down on themselves. The Yetzer Hara beats them up. Not Yehuda. Yehuda is embarrassed publicly. He embarrassed himself. He admits publicly to the sin that he did. He has 2 children in the world to remind him of what he did. But he keeps going forward. Because that's a melech, that's a king. A king does not let himself get thrown off the horse. And if he does get thrown off the horse, he gets right back on. And this is the koyach of the kings of Yehuda, and this is the koyach that is going to bring a Dovid HaMelech. As we know, Dovid HaMelech himself was the master of trials and tribulations and struggles in his life. I don't know that Dovid HaMelech had a day in his life that was filled with respite or peace or harmony. His whole life he was being chased down by his children, by his ministers, by his confidants, by the world. And Dovid HaMelech himself, you go through a Sefer Tehillim, you will see the man never got down once. He's always singing. Every song, Tehillim is a song, Mizmor LeDavid. You're running away from your son, Avshalom. He's about to kill you. The kid is off the derech. He wants to kill his father. Mizmor LeDavid, and he's singing a song, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mizmor LeDavid has to come out. You sing a song. It should be a kina LeDavid. He should be mourning and bewailing. But that was Dovid HaMelech. Dovid HaMelech is a king. Kings are kings of themselves. That means they don't get dragged down by the world that is around them. They live on a higher power. They live on a higher level. And this is where the strength of Klal Yisrael will come from. All of the Gedolei Yisrael of our generation, each one in his own way is trying to share with Klal Yisrael what they believe a person should be working on right now during this time. When there's a battle that's grinding on in Gaza, and Rahman al-Islam, there's soldiers getting killed, and the world is against us, and everybody hates us, and we're all by ourselves. We're once again the one singular nation that is surrounded by the 70 wolves on all sides. So Rav Dov Landau, who assumed the mantle of leadership in Bnei Brak after Rav Chaim Kanievsky and after Rav Gershon Edelstein passed away, Rav Dov Landau gave one simple piece of advice. And his advice was, we don't know the ways of Hashem and why He's doing what He does. We only know how we're going to respond. I suggest, he says, everybody start working on their midos, becoming better people. If you need to be a mavatu, you need to overlook what somebody does to you, overlook what somebody does to you. You need to control yourself, your anger, your arrogance, your laziness, your grumpiness. Control it. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants right now strong people, warriors. A warrior is someone who fights the battles within, not always on outside, without him. There are battles that are brewing inside of a person. We have terrorists inside of us. Mechablim, as they call them, destroyers. And they're coming, and there's underground tunnels in our hearts, in this ventricle and that ventricle, and they're coming in when we least expect it, trying to sabotage us and take us hostage, and our midos hostage, and our Yiras Shamayim hostage. Says Rav Dov Landau, you know what you need to do? You need to fight the battles that are going on inside of you. How do you do that? Be in control. Don't let them control you. You have emotions, get in control of your emotions. There's a beautiful mashal that Dr. Abraham Twersky said over in one of his books. I think he said he wrote like 80 books, something like that. He said, all my books are the same. He said, I just packaged them a little bit differently, but they're all talking about making yourself a better person, being in control of yourself, so on and so forth. One of the books, I don't remember what it was called. I only read 79 of the books. One of the books that he writes in there, a beautiful mashal. He says, many times, people's minds are like going into the worst of places. Worry and anxiety and depression, deep thoughts, fantasy land, all the different things that we have going on inside. And we tell ourselves, I have no control. I have no control. You're driving in the car, and your mind is somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle, as they say, And the next thing you know, you just got home after driving for an hour and 15 minutes. You have no idea where you've been for the last hour and 15 minutes. But when you know the heavy feeling that you have in your heart, you know you are not in a good place. A person looks around what's going on in the world right now. There's so much anxiety. There's so much tension in Klal Yisrael right now. You think HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be tense? You think He wants us to be anxious? You think He wants us to be angry? Take revenge? You think that's what He wants? He doesn't want that. He wants us to be with amunah, menuchas hanefesh, peace of mind. He wants us to be besimcha, with joy. We can only serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ivdu as Hashem. Besimcha, you can't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu any other way. If you're walking around angry and anxious and nervous all day long, how can we serve Hashem? How can we daven? How can we do mitzvahs? So Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky said, a person comes up with this excuse, I have no control over my thoughts. Things come in and they swim around inside my head. I can't control them. They're all over the place. So he says over the following mashal, the following parable. He says, imagine that there is a expert thief in town. And he goes to every house, he cases the joint, he sees which doors are open, which windows are open, and he knows at this hour, during this time of the day, nobody's around, and that window's always open. He breaks into the house, steals all the goods, and he runs out. So there was this big palatial estate in town, and they've got like different entrances and different wings to the house, and every single wing is loaded with possessions, money, and everything. So this guy spends days casing this house, and he sees at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, everybody clears out of this wing, and that door is always unlocked. And on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody clears out of this wing, and that window is open, and so on and so forth. He knows how to get to the whole house. He breaks in the first day, he walks off with hundreds of thousands of dollars of possessions. And the people of the house, the owners of the house, the butlers, the maids, they're in shock. What just happened? Next day he comes into another part of the house, he gets it again. When no one's there, walks out with thousands of dollars worth of stuff. And they said, this is terrible. We can't stop. This guy is too good. He's an expert. We can't stop him. So the Balabayis, the owner of the house, says, well, I have an idea. Let's make sure that we lock up all the windows and all the doors in the house, everywhere in this house, and then there's no way that he'll be able to get in. Very simple solution. So they go around that day, they lock every single door, the front door, the back door, the side doors, the trap doors, every window, they pull them down and they lock them. And the thief comes in to the door that he thought is open, it's locked. He goes to the window, it's locked. He goes to the other one, it's locked. The next thing you know, the police are coming in, they take him away in cuffs, and he's gone. Says Rabbi Twersky, that's the way that a person has to deal with what's going on in their brain. We have windows and we have doors and we have holes that are opened up and we let everything come in. Gotta be a melech, you have to be a king. Lock the door, lock the window. Don't let the thief in. Don't let the terrorist who's coming to terrorize your thoughts, don't let him in. Keep him far away. How? Just lock it up. And then it can't get inside of there. Yehuda and Tamar, they are two people in history. They will go down in infamy for such actions, of courageous actions that they did. She could have saved her life. Embarrass another Yid? Embarrass Yehuda? Yaakov Avinu's son? Embarrass him? Chas v'shalom. You're going to die. I'll die. I'll give him a chance. If he admits, kol hakavod Yehuda. If he doesn't admit, burn me up to smithereens. Yehuda sees the three things. Nobody else knows who these three things are besides Yehuda. Remember that. Nobody else in the world knows who the signet ring, who the staff, and the cloak belong to except Yehuda and Tamar. He sees them in an instant. Tzodka mimeni. She's more righteous than me. She was willing to give up her life that I should live. So not to shame me, I'd rather embarrass myself here in this world than be embarrassed. The Targum Yonason says, than to be embarrassed in front of my forefathers in the world to come. I admit. Or you admit, Yehuda? you're a melech, you're a king. Someone who can be in such overwhelming control of himself, that's kingdom, that's sovereignty, that's malchus. And from there, you can have a Dovid HaMelech, and from there you can have a Mashiach. Mashiach is going to have to rule in such a way, in such a wild and a crazy and an upside down backwards world. He's going to have to be able to rise above all of that and be in total control. For that you have to come from two parents like this. Parents that are in control of themselves. The Sefer Orchos Tzadikim says over along these lines, Ki kol ish haroitze la'avi nafsho lidei midos toivos. Any person who wants to bring themselves into the world of good midos, good character traits, tzarich li'orev yiras shamayim im kol midu u'midu. He has to mix in yiras shamayim, the fear and the awe of heaven, with every single midah, every single trait that he has. Ki yiras Hashem hi hakesher shu machzik kol hamidos. When you have yiras shamayim, when you have the awe, the reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is the connection that's mechazik, that strengthens all of the midas. Yiras shamayim is recognizing there's a Rebbeinu Shalom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has expectations of me. He put me into this world for a reason. There's a plan, there's a rhythm, there's things that I have to do and I have to accomplish. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of me. When you have Yiras Shamayim, when you have the awareness that there's a Rebbeinu Shalom, you're very careful with the way that you act. If you knew that Chazal tell us that on every sicha kala, every small conversation that a husband has with his wife in this world, you're going to be called to judgment in the world to come, and you believe that Hashem is the Eisen Shamas, He's the ear that hears everything that's coming out of your mouth, suddenly that nasty little mouth that we usually have, that we say to our wives, or the wives say to their husbands, suddenly I can be in control. I can be a king. I can be a melech. Because I want to have midos, toivos, I want to have good character traits. Rabbi VAYEISHEV, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was undeniably in his generation the Gadol Ador. You're talking about a man that used to learn Torah in excess of 20 hours a day. He would sit in a room by himself, learn and learn and learn and learn. His whole life was Kedusha, sanctity, holiness. All of the Torah was on his fingertips. You could ask him any question, anywhere in the Gemara, anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch. The most difficult halachic questions came to him, and he would answer in an instant. And they asked him many times, Rabbi VAYEISHEV, how is it possible you can answer the most intricate, difficult, complicated questions like that? He says, because when I learn, and I learn the Gemara, and I learn the Shulchan Aruch that goes together with the Gemara, I think to myself, every possible scenario that could come up in this particular halacha. So when you're asking me a question, I already thought about it. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And he had total recall because he was reviewing all the time. So this was a man that when he was learning, and there's maybe hundreds of thousands of pictures like this, when he was learning, he was oblivious to everything that was going on around him. And there's many, many video clips of people that came to speak to Rabbi VAYEISHEV, and they come into his private chambers, and they're standing over him, and he's learning like this. And 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they could be standing there 45 minutes to an hour, Rabbi VAYEISHEV, oblivious to the world. Until, by mistake, he lifted up his head for 1 second. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, what can I do for you? Or a person sneezed, and at first it didn't bother him, and then it did bother. So there was an almanah, there was a widow who lived in their apartment building. She had lost her husband many years before. Her children did not live with her. She was all by herself. Every Shabbos afternoon, this widow used to come to their house to visit. Now, Rabbi VAYEISHEV, as soon as the meal was over, he would go sit down at his little table that he had in the house, and he would start learning. And when Rabbi VAYEISHEV would learn, like he said, oblivious, did not see anything, did not hear anything, did not even know if somebody was standing right over him. The almana, this widow, she always felt bad disturbing the VAYEISHEV house. She used to rap on the door very lightly and gently. And nobody could hear when she was knocking, except one person, Rabbi VAYEISHEV. Rabbi VAYEISHEV was sitting and learning, totally absorbed and engrossed in his studies, who didn't even hear a person that was standing right next to him. But the gentle knocking of an almana, of a widow on the door, he never missed it. And he used to say, she's at the door. And they said, Ta, you're hearing things. She's not. She's at the door. Ta, no one's knocking. Listen. Oh, Shalom Aleichem, Mrs. Grossberg. How did he hear? Because when you perfect your midas, when you perfect your character, when you are above yourself and you are into a realm of malchus, of being a king in total control, you could be the person who's so engrossed, doesn't hear anything, doesn't know anything. But the cry of the almana, of the widow, the gentle tapping on the door, because she's too embarrassed to disturb your family on Shabbos afternoon, that you don't miss. Says the Orchas Tzadikim, would you like to acquire midas tovos? Again, this is what Rabbi Landau is saying we have to work on right now. Good midas, better character, be a better, more refined person. You must be ma'ariv, you must infuse into your life something called Yirah Shamayim, the fear of Hashem. Like Yehuda said, better I should be embarrassed in this world than the next world in front of the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and my holy forefathers. Because when you're living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you're aware that Hashem is there, and you know that He's watching all of your actions, He hears all of your words, He sees all of those beautiful facial expressions that we love to make at people, then you act in a different way. You talk in a different way. You behave in a different way. Everybody knows the famous story of the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim lost his first wife. He got married a second time around. And the second time around, it was the Yom Tov of Sukkot was coming, and the Chavetz Chaim for many, many years in his house built the sukkah in one area in his house. And he was not a burly man. He wasn't a big, tall, strong, strappy man. He was a little Chavetz Chaim. He was short and slight, and I don't know how much real physical strength he had. He goes out in the morning to build the sukkah, and he builds the sukkah in the place where it always was, and his new wife peeks out the window and says, "You're so mayor. I don't think that's a good place for the sukkah. I like it more over there." And the Chavetz Chaim didn't say, "Well, for the last 30 years." He said, "You like it over there? No problem, my dear wife." And he takes the sukkah apart, and he schleps it over to the other place, and he puts it up. And he says to his wife, "Voila, what do you think?" "I think you were right," she says. I think it belongs over there." And the Chavetz Chaim, with a smile on his face, dismantles the sukkah, carries it back over to the other place, puts it up, and he says, "No," she said, "You're right. It looks good over there." That's midas. That's a character. That's someone that's in control of himself. Kohanim are known to have kas, anger. So how could it be that the Chavetz Chaim didn't show even a tinge of disappointment, of being upset or anger? Because he's the Chavetz Chaim. He worked and he worked and he worked. On Reb Moshe Feinstein, he was known to be the kindest, calmest, most benevolent, loving person in the world. Nobody ever saw him raise his voice. Nobody ever saw him get angry. Nobody saw him ever get upset. And he said, "You should know, I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked on myself that I should never be angry because my nature is to be an angry person." That's a malchus. That's a king. I'm in control of myself. My emotions, my desires, my bad midas, they will not be in control of me. Says the Orchos Tzadikim further, "V'im tatir mimcha kesha yira," if you will untie the knot of yira, of the awe of the Rebbeinu Shalom in your life, where all of your midas are being held together with that recognition. Yibadlu mimcha kol midas toivas, all of the good character traits that you might have, they will run away from you. Ukishein biyadcha midas toivas, and if you don't have midas toivas, good character, ein biyadcha Torah u'mitzvahs, you will not have Torah and you will not have mitzvahs. Ki kol ha-Torah teluya b'tikun ha-midas, all of the Torah depends upon how much you're going to fix and correct your midas, your character. You can't even learn if you have bad midas. You can't daven if you have bad midas. You can't understand Rashi if you have bad midas. Says the Orchos Tzadikim, if you want to have a connection to the Torah, you want to have a connection to the mitzvahs in the right way, then you've got to be a person that is working on their midas, to have good ones. How do you have good midas? You have to have Yirah Shamayim. You have to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching. You have to know that He's listening. You have to know that He knows what's going on inside the brain over here, and He hears all of that negativity all the time. You have to know that. And therefore, says the Orchos Tzadikim, work on your midas. If you work on your midos, if you perfect yourself, you make yourself into a better person. So then that is the way in which a person is going to grow and fuse together into the world of Torah. I was thinking that as Hanukkah is around the corner, Mamish, tomorrow night is the first night. We know that the Yevonim, their main mission was to extract the Torah from Klal Yisrael, to extract the Kedusha from the Jewish people, to extract our beautiful neshamas from serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They wanted us to be able to serve all of their deities and their ideologies and their culture. According to this, it must mean that the nation of Yavan, the Greeks, who were elite in every area, in science, in art, in culture, in sports, in the physical prowess, in the armies, in their conquest of the universe, in all the licentiousness, everything you could imagine, they were the best. So could you imagine then the lowly midas of arrogance, of jealousy, of conceitedness that these people had? That they could walk into Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, to the chosen nation and say, we are going to destroy the very fiber of your spirituality. We are going to walk into the Beis HaMikdash, defile it in the eyes of your God. We'll bring pigs into the Beis HaMikdash and shech them on the altar instead of bringing cows and sheep and goats, because this is going to be the devastation of the spirituality, of the holiness of the Jewish people. Do you know how much arrogance that takes? How much conceit that takes? How much lowliness of a human being that takes to go and fight against the very vestige of what it means to be Klal Yisrael, to be the chosen nation, the holy people. And when you convince the Jewish people to be on your side, to be part of that, so then we end up losing our midos, we lose our character as well. And then you could become misyavnim, you could become Grecian, you could become just like them. You could go to their shows, you could revel in their art, you can see their science, you can pontificate in their philosophies. You could end up being a person who no longer has a connection to Torah and to mitzvahs because everything has gone down in your life. Says Rav Dov Landau, you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us during this time while there are battles that are going on? Become malachim, become kings. Become people that are in control, become better people, become greater in your midos, in your character development. Take a midah, a bad midah that you have, or something that you're weak in, and find a way to improve it, to make it better, to make it cleaner. If it's something that for years and years and years has been gnawing away at you, nibbling away on your brain, it bothers you. Why do I act like this all the time? Why do I do this all the time? Why do I let this guy get my goat? Why does that happen to me? Maybe now is the time that a person has to work on improving themselves. Because that's an inner world battle that everybody goes through. the Yetzaharas and the taivas and the desires and the bad midas that are inside. It's a whirlwind inside of a person. We have to make some kind of rhyme or reason out of it. And the only way to make rhyme or reason out of it is we must be aware HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching us. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is demanding of us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants things from us. He wants a certain level of behavior. And when we begin to act in that way, we become the kings of Klal Yisrael. The kings, Yehuda, the queen, Tamar, because of their strength of character, they are zeiche to bring children into this world that will be the predecessors of Dovid HaMelech. And Dovid HaMelech is going to be the dynasty of kings which eventually will bring Mashiach into this world. So as we mentioned already several times in previous classes, and we're learning it on Shabbos, these are the Chevlei HaMashiach that we're in right now. These are the birth pangs of Mashiach, and it's getting intense. And everybody knows that when the labor gets the most intense, that means the baby is coming very soon. So that means that things are speeding up, the contractions are getting heavier. She's already holding, Claudia's holding at 10 centimeters right now. And therefore we have to do whatever we can to make ourselves ready for the birth of Mashiach Tzidkenu. And how do we do that? We have to become those people, that nation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, that's going to live on a level that's worthy of bringing Mashiach into this world. If we work on ourselves, we rule over ourselves. That means our emotions, our bad midas, our lowly desires, our yetzaharas, we rule over them. And the way that we rule is because we recognize that Hashem is always watching overhead. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right here. He's listening, He's watching, He knows what we're doing. We have to behave in a different way. When a person lives like that, you're a melech, you're a king. You're a king, you're a king. We're called a nation of kings. How could everybody be a king? There's only one king in a nation. How can we be a nation of kings? Because everybody's a king in their own right. Everybody's a king in their own life. Everybody's a king that rules over their lowly parts and brings them up to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the right way. So perhaps, Be'ez Hashem, if we will learn these great lessons of our great leaders of previous generations, Yehuda, Tzadka Mimeni, had no compulsion at all. I need to admit, I'll admit. I'll embarrass myself, I'll embarrass myself. Nobody else knows about these three things. I could get out of here right now, scot-free, nothing to worry about. No, I can't do that. Because that's not what a king does. He doesn't take the easy way out. He fights the battle head on. And we all have those battles on the inside of us that we have to start working on. I want to leave you off with a story that's right along these lines over here. There was one of the great Hasidic Rebbes of the previous generation. He was one of the great disciples of the Maggid of Mezrich, was the Noam Elimelech. The Noam Elimelech was a man that reached very, very high levels of Kedusha. He had even what's called Ruach HaKodesh. He was able to see things that other people could not see. Every Rosh Chodesh, in his Beis Midrash, he would make a Rosh Chodesh Tish, which means that everybody would come to the table, they would serve a meal, they would sing, he would say fascinating, mystical Torah to everybody and inspire everybody for the up-and-coming month to renew their kaiches for the new month coming. In the middle of one of the Rosh Chodesh meals, the doors to the Beis Midrash open up, and there are two gentlemen that walk in, and the Noam Elimelech looks and says, I can't believe it. People are walking into my Beis Midrash not wearing any clothing. I can't believe it. And everybody turns and looks, and they see two men walking in clothing, and they look at the Noam Elimelech, and they're like, they're wearing clothes. And the Noam Elimelech says, these people, there's never been anyone as bare since the time of Adam HaRishon in the Garden of Eden. And they look again, they're wearing their clothing, they're dressed. And by now, these men that are standing at the door, they hear what the Noam Elimelech is saying, and they start trembling. And they walk over to them, and they said, Rabbi, what is the Rabbi talking about? He said, I've never seen two people as naked from mitzvahs as the two of you. You have no mitzvahs in your life that are surrounding you. And he said, it's all because of the embarrassment and the shame that you caused to the Rav of Zlotchov, Rabbi Yechiel Michal, the Rebbe of Zlotchov. And they start crying and they say, Rebbe, you're right. He says, you should know that because of what you did to Rabbi Yechiel, you should know that all of your mitzvahs were taken away. I'm looking at two naked people standing in front of me. You don't have a single mitzvah that is covering you. They said, we know, Rebbe, what are you supposed to do? He said, perhaps if you will tell over the story of what you did to the Rebbe of Zlotchov, Rabbi Yechiel Michal, in front of the crowd that is assembled here, the shame and the embarrassment that you will experience will be a kapara for you, and Hashem will give you back your mitzvahs. And so these two men stand up with their heads hanging low, and they tell over the following story. They were business partners, and they made lots and lots of money. And they had one bank account basically, and the deal between them was, whatever you need, you reach into the account, you take the money you need. You need money for your living expenses, you need for the school, you need for your wife, for an anniversary present, reach in and take whatever you need. We're on the honor system. And they would reach in and they would reach in and they would take money, They were buying up every tract of land that they possibly could in the town of Zlotchov. And they were becoming like moguls in that town, and they were becoming handsomely wealthy. They had a worker, we'll call him Moshe. Moshe, their worker, had a house next to many parcels of land that these two men already owned. And they came to Moshe and they said, listen, Moshe, we own that land and that land, we want your house too. And he said, I'm not selling my house. This is my house, my blood, sweat, and tears. It's all that I have. I'm not a very wealthy man, but at least I have a house. I'm not selling my house. He said, listen, Moshe, you work for us. Do us a favor. Sell us your house. Then we'll own the whole parcel of land. And I'm not selling my house. He said, we were very arrogant, these men start saying. And we wanted that piece of land. So we came to Moshe, we put a little pressure on him. We said, listen, either you're going to sell us the land, you're going to give us you're going to sell us your house. It's worth 600 rubles. We'll give you 600 rubles right now. It's a lot of money. Or we're going to fire you. And you're going to lose your job. You'll be out on the street. You won't have money to support your family. He said, I can't sell my house. I put so much into this house. This is all that I have, my only possession. I can't sell my house. So they said, we're being serious. Either you're going to sell us the house, 600 ruble, go buy yourself another house, or we're going to fire you. And he refused to sell the house. So they said, Moshe, we're parting ways right now. You're fired. He's fired. He's trying to make a living. He's doing odd end jobs here, over there. The family's going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into poverty. And these two men are over there with their heads hanging low. And we were so cruel. We were so mean. We had no compassion on most people in town that were poor. We had no problem. We'll give them all the stock of money in the world. But to him, we wanted to make sure that he never had any money for himself so that we could get everything back for ourselves. Finally, after months and months and months and months, we're watching him. We see he is really in bad shape. So we come to him again and we say, listen, Moshe, now it's not what it was a year ago when we were offering you 600 rubles. Listen, we'll give you 200 rubles for your house. We'll hire you back, but only at a third of the salary that you used to make. What's your choice, really? You're about to be out on the streets. So without any choice, Moshe agreed to the deal. And we drew up a contract. And we said in the contract, you're selling us the house now belongs to us. 200 rubles, that's all that you're getting. So he writes the contract, and we sign on the dotted line, he signs on the dotted line, and we did not see the last two little words that he wrote on the contract. We didn't pay attention. Where he wrote, Shaloi Biritzayni, this is against my will. I'm not selling this happily. I'm selling this house against my will. Okay. You can only imagine, he sells his house, they go live in some little tiny shack. He comes back to work, but he's not the same man. He's a broken person. The pressures, the anguish that we cause him, the angst that we put him through. Within a very short amount of time, he got very sick, and that sickness ended up taking his life, and he died. And my partner and I, they're saying in front of all this group of Hasidim, we knew that we were the ones that killed him. Nobody else knew that except us and his wife. But his wife was so afraid of everything that we did already, she decided not to press any charges. This man Moshe had relatives, and they knew that Moshe owned the house that he lived in, and they thought to themselves, you know what, we'll come back to town, we'll give the wife a chunk of money, and then we'll take the house for ourselves, we'll sell, we'll make a lot of money. So they come back into the town, and they come to the wife, and they tell her, look, here's a few hundred rubles, whatever it is, let us have the house, we'll sell the house, and we'll take the rest of the money. She says, we don't own the house anymore. And they said, well, what happened? Well, what happened was, she tells them the whole story. She says, there's a document, let's see the document. And they see on the document, Shaloi B'Ritzaini, that the house was sold against my will, not with my consent. So when you have those words on a document, so in a court of law, in a Bezdin, those words are very strong, which means that you could actually nullify the sale from ever having happened. So the relatives of Moshe go to the Rav of Zlotchov, Rav Yechiel Michal, and they show him the document, and he says, let's call these two owners to a Bezdin, to a court of law, and let's try the case. And so everybody comes. You have the wife, you have the relatives, you have these two businessmen over here, the moguls. And Rav Yechiel Michal of Zlotchov was a very holy, holy man. He looks at the document and he says, it says on the document at the bottom, Shaloi B'Ritzaini, that he sold the house without his consent. You should know, he says, this document is null and void. And he says that this Kedusha of Rav Yechiel Michal was so great, he looked at the document, the letters actually fell off the page. He holds up the document, it's a blank paper. He says, there's nothing to talk about anymore. The house goes back to the wife and to her family. We were furious. You embarrass us like that in court. You take away the house. You tell us our document is no good. We were furious. And we were thinking, how are we going to get back against Rav Yechiel Michal of Zlotchov? We were very close, he says, with the municipality of Zlotchov. And in that town, there was a fellow that was in charge of all of the pricing and all of the marketplace. And it bothered him. In every single store in the whole town, prices kept going up and up and up. But in the Jewish quarter, prices stayed exactly as they were. They were fixed prices. They never rose. And he asked us, what's going on over there in the Jewish quarter? How come the prices are always staying the same where everybody else is going up? So they looked at this. This is finally our chance to get back at the Rav. And they said, well, you should know, the Rav of Zlotchov, he rules the business world with an iron fist. He doesn't want anyone to become more successful than the other, and therefore he kept every price off exactly where it is. And nobody can tell him otherwise. Nobody can change his mind. That's how he runs things, like with an iron fist. And this man said, are you serious? There's a Jew in this town that is calling the shots over me? Get him in here right away. So the Shlucha Bezdin, whatever it is, the courts, messengers go, and they drag Yechiel Michal into the court. So you have this holy, holy, holy Jew that is over here. And they start throwing the book at him. How dare you go against what the city does? How dare you go against the municipality? How dare you go into this? And he has these two armed guards, so to speak, standing by his side, and they say, okay, guards, get ready. They're holding whips. You're going to whip the Rav right now for his blazing, egregious, grievous, whatever the word is in English, against us. So the guard lifts up his whip. And Rav Yechiel Michal Zlotchev stares at the guard with a piercing stare. And suddenly he says, ah! And he drops the whip, and his arm goes paralyzed. So they said to the other guard, you get in there and you whip him. He grabs the whip, and his arm goes into a paralyzation, and he drops the whip. At this point, the head of the municipality realizes that he's in big trouble. He says, okay. Fine, you're off, forget about it. Go back to the Jewish community. So these two men are standing there in front of the entire crowd of Hasidim with their heads hung low. And they say, because of our arrogance, because of our conceit, because of our power, money-hungry things that we did, we were willing to be mavazah, to embarrass the Rav and get him in trouble. And that's why the Rebbe here sees that we're not wearing any clothes. So the Noam Elimelech said, Salachta, HaKadosh Baruch has forgiven you now with your embarrassment. The clothing is coming back. If we will work on our midas, and we will work on ourselves, and we will become the greater people that we can become, then we become like Malachim, we become like the kings over ourselves, kings of Klal Yisrael. We're the nation of Malachim, of kings, and Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, as Yehuda and Tamar were Zeicher, to give birth to a Peretz, who from Peretz is going to come a Dovid HaMelech, and from a Dovid HaMelech is going to come a Mashiach Tzidkenu. We should be Zeicher that in the schus of our efforts to become rulers and kings over ourselves, we will be Zeicher Mirz Hashem, to bring into this world Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mheira v'yameinu.